Om Shanno Mitra Sham Varunaha Shanno Bhavat Varyama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yaschandasa mrishabho vishwarupaha chandobhyodhyamritaat sambabhuva samendro medhaya aspranotu amritasya devadharano bhuyasam shariram me vicharshanam jihva me madhumattama karna abhyam bhuri vishruvam brahmanah koshosi medhaya pihitaha shrutam me gopaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Aham vrikshasya reriva kirtif prishtam gireriva urdupavitro vajiniva svamritamasmi dravinagum savarchasam sumedha amritokshitaha itirtashankor vedanuvachanam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Apyayantu mama angani vakpranaschakshuh shrotramatho balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahmopanishadam maham brahma nirakuryam mama brahma nirakarot anirakaranamastu anirakaranam me astu tadatmani nirateya upanishatsu dharmaha te mai santu te mai santu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vang me manasi pratisthita mano me vachi pratishtitam avir ma edhi vedasya ma ani isthaha shrutam me ma prahasihi anenaditena ahoratran sandadhami ritam vadishyami satyam vadishyami tanmamavatu tadvaktaramavatu avatu mam avatu vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bhadram no api vataya manaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bhadram karnebhih shrunuyama devaha Bhadram pashyema akshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangaistuštuvagum sastanubhih Vyashema devahitam yadayuhu Swasti na indro vriddhashravaha Swasti nah pusha vishvavedaha Swasti nastarksho arishtanemihi Swasti no brihaspatir dadhatu. O Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yo brahmanam vidadhati purvam Yo vai vedanscha prahinoti tasmai tagumha devamatma buddhi prakasham mumukshurvai sharanamaham prapadye. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Narayanam Padma Bhuvam Vasishtam Shaktim Cha Tatputra Parasharam Cha Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padmapadam Cha Hasta Malakam Cha Shishyam Tam Totakam Vartikakaramanyaan Guru Asmat Gurun Santato Manatosmi. Om Vishwam Darpana Dishyamana Nagari Tulyam Najantargatam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Bahiribodbhutam Yatha Nidraya Yat Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. Bijasyantarivānkuro jagadidam prang nirvikalpam punaha maya kalpita desha kala kalana vaichitrya chitri kritam maya viva vijrambhayatyapi maha yogi vayasvechaya tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. Yasyaiva spuranam sadatmakam asatkalparthakam bhasate sakshat tattvamasiti veda vachasa yo bodhayatyashritan yat sakshat karanat bhavenna punaravrittir bhavambho nidhau Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. Nana Chidraghatoddarastita Mahadipa Prabhavaswaram Jnanam Yasya Tu Chakshuradikarna Dwara Bahispandate Janamiti Tameva Bhantam Anubhati Etat Samastam Jagat Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. Deham pranamapi indriyanapi chalam buddhim cha shunyam viduhu stri baland jatopamastvamiti pranta brisham vadina maya shakti vilasa kalpita mahavyamoha samharine Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. So I hope you got my file that had the Adhyasa Bhashya in Sanskritam by Sri Shankaracharya. And so today we will start the introduction to the Adhyasa Bhashya. And as I indicated to you, it might be just interesting to verbalize the Bhashya in Sanskritam. So let me spend a couple of minutes to just do that, just as a sample. And then we will begin the analysis and the introduction. Introduction really, the full analysis will take a little while. So here it goes. So this is the Adhyasa Bhashyam. And so here just listen, and if you know Sanskritam, then you can follow that if you want to. but you don't need to. Adhyasa Bhashyam. Yushmad asmat pratyaya gocharayoho vishaya vishayinoho tama prakashavad viruddha svabhavayoho itare itara bhava anupapattau siddhayam tad dharmanam api sutaram itare itara bhava anupapattihi iti ataha asmat pratyaya gochare vishayini chidatmake युष्मत् प्रत्यय गोचरस्य विषयस्य तद्धर्माणां च अध्यासः तद्विपर्येण विषयिनः तद्धर्माणां च विषये अध्यासः मिथ्येति भवितुं युक्तम् तथापि अन्योन्यस्मिन् अन्योन्यात्मकताम् अन्योन्यधर्माश्च अध्यासस्य इतरेतर अविवेकेन अत्यंत विविक्तयोः धर्मधर्मिनोः मिथ्याज्ञानं निमित्तः सत्यानृते मिथुनीकृत्य अहमिदं मम इदम् इति नैसर्गिकोः यं लोकव्यवहारः आह कोऽयमध्यासः नामेति उच्यते स्मृतिरूपः परत्र पूर्वदृष्ट अवभासः तं केचित् अन्यत्र अन्यधर्माध्यासः इति वदन्ति केचित्तु यत्र यत् अध्यासः तत् विवेक आग्रह निबन्धनः भ्रम इति अन्ये तु यत्र यद् अध्यासः तस्य एव विपरीत धर्मकल्पना आचक्षते सर्वथापि तु अन्यस्य अन्यधर्म अवभासताम् न व्यभिचरति तथा च लोके अनुभवः शुक्तिका हि रजतवत् अवभासते एकश्चन्द्र सद्वितीयवत् इति. So I'll just go up to that point to just kind of give you how the Sanskritam sounds like. Okay. Let's see where we are. So, in the last class, we had talked about the 550 sutras divided into 4 adhyayas, chapters. The Samanvaya Adhyaya, the Avirodha Adhyaya, the Sadhana Adhyaya, and Phala Adhyaya. And out of that, in the Samanvaya Adhyaya, there are 4 verses, there are 4 sutras that itself form an adhukarana. So the name of the adhikarana is the sutra itself. This doesn't happen in all the other 551 sutras. There you have multiple sutras for each adhikarana. Adhikarana means the topic, as you know. But the first 4 are so important that the adhikarana and the sutra all are just one. It's kind of like, San Francisco, you have an entire city, and then the city itself is the state, kind of like Washington, D.C. And so the Washington, D.C. can be a state or it can be a city, it's all one. That's how important that is. That's how important not the city, but the definition of the adhikarana is. Okay, so today we will go into the analysis of inference, Anumanam, in a little bit more detail. So in the last class or 2, we talked a little bit about the difference between Anumanam, which is inference, and Arthapatti, which is called postulation for a lack of better word. Postulation. And so here we saw, just to clarify, because one of the students had written to me saying that there might be some confusion, and he had done some research on other examples and so on. And I won't go into the lot of detail of that, but I do want to reiterate, and I hope you're clear about this. If you're not, then please write to me or something. That in normal circumstance, Anumanam means you have a direct perception which is hiding the place where the conclusion has to be made. So there is a direct perception, meaning that there is a smoke that you see coming out, but you don't see the forest be on fire. So we will see this in more detail in a minute. So I'll just want to give you a quick introduction to this. So you see the smoke, but you don't see the fire. But because you have an absolute certainty about the fact that whenever there is a smoke, there is fire, you conclude that the forest is on fire. So this is what is called inference, where you have a direct perception, and you also have what is called vyapti jnanam, which I'll explain in a minute. Vyapti jnanam here means whenever there is a smoke, there is a fire. Then you can conclude that there is fire in the mountain, which you don't see directly. Now let's go to Arthapatti, just to reiterate what we had said before. So Arthapatti, the difference is that you don't have this direct relationship between where there is a fire, there is a smoke. You don't have that. Because that is your own personal relation, your own personal experience. Okay? So in the example of if there are a lot of puddles in the street, then you can conclude that there must have been a rain last night, heavy rain in fact. It must have been. Now here you don't have the perception of the rain falling, and it was a surprise to you that you didn't hear the rain, you didn't experience the rain, and yet there was so much water on the street. So I think one of the students had pointed out, and I think that is a correct one if you think about it, that there is a multi-level inference here. Be whatever that is, here is the definition of Arthapatti. Arthapatti means that you have a direct perception. You have a direct perception, but you don't know what the cause is. So even in the case of a heavily puddled street, that is your direct perception. Now if you are a child of 5 or 6, somewhere in that, because then it would change after that, but up until 5 or 6, you don't know that the rain is the only one that can cause such puddles. You don't know that. So in that case, you cannot conclude, even though there is a 5-year-old child that can see the perception of the puddles, but it cannot conclude that there must have been a rain. that can only come if you grow enough and you can see others have told you this also. You may not actually even experience it, or the experience itself would be nice to confirm it, but you can now tell if it rains so much that none of the other street cleaners or just spraying with water can create those kinds of puddles. Then, once you have that knowledge, whenever you see puddles surprisingly in the morning, you can conclude, aha, there must have been a rain. So this is the example of the Arthapatti. Now look at this is what is called, this would be called Laukika Arthapatti, worldly Arthapatti, Laukika Arthapatti. Then there is a Shastrika Arthapatti. The Shastrika Arthapatti is what we are really interested in. This is what all the others are just examples, and what is exemplified is the Shastrika Arthapatti. What is the Shastrika Arthapatti? The Shastrika Arthapatti is, as I indicated to you, I'm just revising it so that I can make my point repeatedly and clearly, hopefully. The Shastrika Arthapatti is that all of us, every one of us, you and I and others, are a single person through our lives. So if the range that we are talking about is one life up to this point, from the point where you were born, the point where you are now, if you look at that range, we can all conclude and agree that we are one person. That much you should be very clear about, because you cannot be multiple people. If you are multiple people, then you will not have any memory whatsoever. Then I'll ask you, where were you 10 years ago? You'll say, I have no idea. Who are you talking about? Forget about 10 years ago, even from the last day to this day. Even from a minute to minute, you will be changing so much. That's not possible. Look at the beauty of the creation. The beauty of the creation is that you are really one in the same person. And so this is given all over. In Bhagavad Gita also it says that in Dakshinamurti Stotram on the 7th verse it says Balyadishu api jagradadishu tatha sarvasavasthapi vyavrittaha sanu artamanam hiti atyantam spurantam sada. This is the same person. Same number 6. Prag aswapsamiti prabodha samaye yak pratyabhigyayate. Pratyabhigyayate means that you just recollect. Every time when you are, if somebody is asking you, can you tell me about yourself, who are you? You say, I was born in such and such time and I got educated and my matriculation was in such and such high school. If pratyabhigya, it's not possible unless you are the same person. Okay, so that being the case, this is like knowing that I am the same person is like knowing that there are a lot of puddles in the water. Okay, that's the connection. You should see that. Knowing that I am the same person, knowing that I cannot be a different person, I have to be the same person, is just like seeing puddles in the street. Now, you don't know how you are the same person. That much you don't know. So just like a 5-year-old that does not know that the puddles can only be created by heavy rain, similarly, This is the Laukika example, but the Shastrika example is that you don't know how you are the same person. And in fact, not knowing that I am the same person causes all my problems in life. All problems. Why? Because not knowing I am the same person, not understanding that I am the same person, I am gone with whatever changes are happening to me. It is kind of like a spiritual lie. I am lying through my teeth, not realizing that I am lying. Lying means what? You're saying that when I was young, that itself is a contradiction. You see the contradiction? Because when you say I was young, you're saying two things. You cannot say that you were young unless you were the same person. If you are the same person, how can you say I was young and now I'm old? Which is opposite to what that is. But we are oblivious of those contradictions and we just go around in our life and we suffer because of it. So therefore, the Shastrika Arthapatti is very important. And a Shastrika Arthapatti is like a 5-year-old understanding that the water, the heavy water on the street can only come from Ishvara's shower, the rain. Similarly, the Shastrika Arthapatti can only come, this is the important thing, that if I am the same person, it must mean that I am asangaha, I am unconnected, I am swayambhuhu, I exist by myself, I am aware by myself, I am not dependent on anything else to do my awareness. I am independently aware, I am independently existing. This is the knowledge that the Shastra gives us. And with that knowledge, everything becomes clear. Everything meaning that how is it that I am the same person? Now I can understand that my doubts get cleared instantly. That it must be because I am independent. Asangoham. And here, because this is a much more sophisticated and a very new information, it takes a while. So yes, it takes a while, but the revelation is instantaneous. So this is what is called Shastrika Arthapatti, very similar to the Laukika Arthapatti. I hope this is clear, and with that we will put that issue aside and then go forward with the analysis of the Adhyasa Bhashya. So in the analysis of the Adhyasa Bhashya, we actually start with an analysis of the ingredients of inference, Anumanam. So this becomes an important thing also, so let us look at it. So there I had given you the previous file which talked about the 4 elements of Anumanam, right? One is called Paksha, which means the place where the focus is. What is the place of focus? This is called Paksha. So let me give you all four of them, then I'll explain each one of them. The second one is called Saddhya. Saddhya means what needs to be proven, what is to be proven, which is unproven yet. Number two. Number three is Hetu. The Hetu here means the logic which leads to a proof is called Hetu. And the fourth one is an example, Drishtanta. Drishtanta is a very interesting samasa. Drishtaha antaha yasya means that one whose end is seeing things very clearly. This is called Drishtanta. So that means an example. So example, the utility of an example is that you may not be able to see the complexity of it, but with the example, the simplicity of the example, you can say, yes, this much I understand. Yeah, I can see the example. This is what is called Drishtanta. So Drishta Antaha Yasya, whose end is a clear drishti, a clear vision. It's called Drishtanta. So those are the four elements of Anumanam. Okay? Now, here the most important one in some way is Paksha. So Paksha here means what is the locus of discussion? To keep that the same. So for example, if you know, so take for example, in fact there's lots of things involved here. Take for example, analyzing the constituents of moon. Okay? Supposing you want to analyze what does it moon consist of? There you need to have data. You need to have some data. You cannot just say the moon is, I think it's about 5 million miles away. It looks like it's about 5 million. You cannot say that. Why? Because to come up to the conclusion that it is about 5 million miles away, or whatever it is, I can't even remember, you cannot just say that. You have to have some data. So you have to have some scientific data which will say that if it moves this much and it comes around, and if the light takes us this long to reach us, then we can tell that it is 5 million miles away. So here you need data. You also need Paksha. Paksha means what? Paksha means that the locus of our analysis is the moon. Okay? Now, suppose you have discovered, you have correctly concluded that the moon is 5 million miles away. Okay? You've done it. That is, you have very good knowledge about the distance of the moon from the earth. Now, if you say, therefore, the Mars is 2 million miles away, what have you done? Here's a problem. The conclusion of the moon being 5 million miles away only refers to the moon. You have to keep the same Paksha. You cannot transpose Pakshas. You cannot say, because the moon is 5 million years 5 million miles away. Therefore, the Mars is 2 million miles away. You cannot do that. Unless you have some data to prove it. That's a different thing. But all of a sudden, you cannot just say, I think the moon is 5. We know that. So therefore, it must be about 2 million. You cannot do that because the paksha is different. So the whole analysis has to be done on given one single paksha. This is a very important thing that we will exploit in understanding why the many of the conclusions that we have about ourselves, what are the theories about ourselves, are totally wrong because the paksha changes. We'll come to that in a few minutes. But now let us see, let's finish this topic about what is an Anumanam, the 4 different elements of Anumanam. So there we saw Paksha, Saddhyam, Hetu and Drishtanta. Okay? So the example here is that the mountain is on fire because I see the smoke right there. The paksha is important because supposing you say that I see the mountain is on fire because I see smoke. The smoke may be from your fire pit in your backyard. That doesn't mean the mountain is on fire. The mountain has to have the smoke. So the paksha has to be kept the same. Then on that paksha you have to now see what is to be proven and why is the mountain on fire. So he says that the mountain is on fire. If you look at the Sanskrit sentence with it, he says Parvataha Vanniman Dhumatvat Yatha Mahanathe. By the way, I made a typo here. Parvataha Vanniman Dhumatvat Yatha Maha. I said Mahanathe. So the extra akara has to be removed. It should be Mahanathe. Mahanathe means a kitchen. Means the kitchen. So here it means that the mountain is on fire. Why? Because I don't see the fire? Because Dhumatvat. Because it has smoke in it. And therefore then the Drishtanta is that just like, and this is the old style kitchen, not the new kitchen, where everything was done with coal and coke and wood. This is what our BJP government has done so well. They have given mass gas to all the people, many of the poor people. This is so wonderful. Modi ji has done just a wonderful job. But before that, really all the kitchen fires were smoky fires. So you know that whenever there is a smoke, there is a fire. And because the mountain has smoke, therefore it is on fire. So this is the whole thing. So this is what is called Vyapti Jnanam. Vyapti Jnanam means that whenever there is something, it must be true. So here he says, Yatra yatra dhumaha tatra tatra vannihi. Yatra yatra dhumaha, whenever there is a smoke, tatra tatra vannihi. This is called Vyapti Jnanam. So the Vyapti Jnanam is true for even in the case of Laukika Anumanam. It is also true in the case of Laukika Arthapatti, that whenever there are puddles, such heavy puddles, there must be rain. So that Vyapti Jnanam applies to both Anumanam and Arthapatti. But here we are just talking about Anumanam. So this is what is called Vyapti Jnanam. So Vyapti Jnanam also requires some education, growing up. A child doesn't know that whenever there is a smoke, it must be fire. It sees smoke, it says this is a smoke. But an educated child, a grown-up child, knows that cannot be without a fire. So this is the Vyapti Jnana. So now, what it means is, to summarize before we go into the further analysis of Shankara Bhashya, the data and conclusion must be about the same object. Hetu and Saddhya will not make sense unless it is in the same paksha. This is the logic. Okay? So now science is collecting data about the world. So we begin the analysis. This is where the analysis really begins now. We have so much science, scientific inquiry, medical inquiry, the whole COVID, the attack of the COVID, it all has to do with scientific inquiry, analysis. What does it look like? How does it attack? What are the constituents of this virus? How can we invert it? What happens to the body? Can we put some vaccination? All of this. The place where the analysis has to be done is enormous. Medical, scientific, ecological, everything all requires a lot of scientific data. And the data has to be also postulated, it has to be analyzed, it has to be inferred, connections have to be made. All of this happens. Okay? But when you say Laukika Anumanam, the Laukika means the worldly, the scientific, the medical, all these kinds of things. What is the paksha for it? Where is the paksha for it? It is the anatma. The entire world, which is under the examination of the analysis of the science, is called anatma world. You cannot have the analysis and data of the anatma world to apply to the atma. That would be exactly like a wonderful analysis of the distance of the moon to casually apply it to the distance of the Mars. It doesn't work. Paksha has to be the same. You cannot change the paksha. And Atma is not observable. It is not under the purview of the science and medical uses and ecological analysis, nothing like that. Kathopanishad and everybody else says Ashabdam, Asparsham, Arupam, Avyayam, Tatha Arasam, Nityam, Adrishtam, All this whatever analysis you are saying, it is not. Ashabdam. Can you hear the Atma? You cannot hear the Atma. Oh, can you touch it? No, you can't even touch it. But you must be able to smell it. You can't smell it. So it has no gunas. It must have some gunas. No, it doesn't have any gunas. It's very strange. Then what is it? If it is not part of the world, it cannot be there. It's there. Similarly, we saw in the Mandukya Upanishad, na antah prajna, na bahish prajna, na ubhayatah prajna, na pragyana ghanaha, na pragyam, adrishtam, avyavaharyam, agrahyam, alakshanam, achintyam, avyapadeshyam. Same thing. Neti neti iti adeshaha. Atma has nothing to do with it. So all your conclusions are wrong because you're changing the paksha. So this is why the Shastra says, please do not resort to Laukika logic and apply it to Shastrika logic. It doesn't work. It is stupid. It's as stupid as a great deal of scientific work done on the moon, suddenly applying casually to the Mars. How stupid that is. Same way here also. Naisha tarkena matya. In fact, there is a sutra much later on, I don't know, we'll ever come to it. It's called Tarkasya Pratishthānāt Apratishthānam. He says, please, Tarka doesn't apply to Atma. Logic doesn't apply to. The logic applies to Atma, but the Laukika logic does not apply. So what it means is that just because it is not Anatma doesn't mean that it has no logic. But the logic that applies to the Atma has to be given by the Shastra, by the Vedas. The Vedas has its own data. Like this example that we just saw earlier about the fact that if I am the same person, then it must be that I am Swayambhu, that I am Asangaha. This is the logic. So it doesn't say that it doesn't have logic. You cannot say the world is very logical, but the Atma analysis is illogical. No, that's not what we're saying. It just means that the logic of the Shastra has its own data. So the Shastra, of course, says that I'm telling you something that you cannot find. See, this is the very logic of Vedas. The Veda even, you see, it is interesting, the Vedas, all three portions of it, Karma Kanda, Upasana Kanda and Jnana Kanda, all three of them, look at this. All three of them are something that cannot be replicated in the world by science. Science meaning a structured inquiry. That's what science means. Right? So, for example, it has to be repeatedly shown that this is working. So, in the case of the COVID testing also, they have to see it, they have to apply it to thousands of people and say, yes, it works. Therefore, you can conclude 90% of the time the Moderna vaccine is effective. So that's all scientific inquiry, scientific structure and so on. So that also is okay. But similarly here also in the case of Shastra, there is repeated enunciation of the nature of the Atma. In fact, the whole Samanvaya Adhyaya of Brahma Sutra is dedicated to doing just that. See, look at this. We have hundreds of Upanishads. Hundreds of Upanishads. But it's just so sad. My library has so many books that I have not even seen them. I just bought them because that was the thing to do, but you don't have enough time to read. Yesterday I was looking through. I had a 3-volume, I think I've mentioned this to you. I have a 3-volume set of 108 main Upanishads. And so that one is really beautiful because it also has the Hindi translations of them. And so I've studied from once in a while, if I get some time, I will pick up one of those Upanishads. Then I found that I have a book which is purely in Sanskrit. It's called Upanishad Sangraha. There I found that instead of 108 Upanishads, there's, I think for my memory side, just looking at it, I'll bring it here. It's upstairs. It's like 400 Upanishads. And it's a fascinating thing. I didn't even know this, that there is Shaiva and Vaishnava Upanishads. Yoga Upanishad. I don't know which ones those are. There's 438 Upanishads. Anyway, the Samanvaya Adhyasa of Brahma Sutra doesn't go through all of them, but it goes through so many important Upanishads by pointing out that it is a very consistent data. Don't you see this? And then you and I are the final laboratory where we have to see this for ourselves. That if I am the same person, then it must be that I am asangaha. This is what the Shastra is saying. So it's not as though these are theories that can never be proven. In fact, that's the only theory that can be directly seen. Aparoksha Anubhuti, right there. So what it means is that the Shastrika Anumanam is different from the Laukika Anumanam. Okay. So all of this will be given. In fact, in the analysis of the Brahma Sutra, there is Shastrika Anumanam given, and then, as we saw earlier, Samshayas, Vishaya, and Purvapaksha, Siddhanta, all of that means that I also have to continuously point out that please do not change Paksha. So when there is some Purva Paksha which will say that this is not correct, you are not telling the right thing, there is no Adhyasa. We're going to see this today, that there is no Adhyasa. What error are you talking about? There's no error. There's no error. So then we say, yes, there is, because here is the defect in your logic. It's not applying the same way. You are changing Paksha. What you are talking about is an Atma, that those rules do not apply to the Atma. So all of that will be talked about. Let me see what else there is, if I'm missing anything. I think just the definition, sometimes we have talked about it. You'll often see sometimes where it will say Dushta Tarka or Shushka Tarka. So Dushta Tarka means defective logic. Shushka Tarka means just dry logic for the sake of making a point. It has no validity whatsoever. And so these are just words that are used. Dushta Tarka. This is what we call Laukika Tarka. Laukika Tarka may be okay. So the typical example is that, and this often happens, there is always, especially when there is a lot of drinks flowing and people are all half drunk and so on and so forth, and people say, where is God? There is no God. Because if God was there, then we would have seen him. This is called Laukika Tarka. If you tell him God is the very essence of everything that you see, this is Shastrika Tarka. But the Laukika Tarka is, don't you see the logic I'm talking about? That if he was there or she was there, I would see him or her right now. Or I can find out. But since nobody has ever found out, that means there is no, this is called Laukika Tarka. And so Shastrika conclusion is that the whole samsara, the whole feeling that all is not well with me, I am under the control of the world, and I am just a small individual which will disappear sooner or later, not sure what is the purpose of life. All those kinds of things is called samsara, put together. Doubts, fears, regrets, it's called samsara. So the Shastric vision is that this samsara is caused by an error. Adhyasa. It's called Adhyasa. Adhyasa means an error. So here one of the most important example is that of the Rajju Sarpa, the rope and snake. So, because you cannot say that there is Adhyasa. Give us an example. The example given is that if you happen to see a rope but not clearly, in other words, you cannot see a rope in complete darkness, and you can see the rope clearly in clear light, but if there is some in between, little bit of light enough for you to see the rope but not adequately to identify this is a rope, you can wrongly conclude, adhyasa, that this is a live snake. This is the example. So we say that the whole samsara, as you know, I'm just repeating, it's nothing new for you, you're all experienced students, that the whole samsara, Shastra says, is like a snake which doesn't exist. And the only way to remove the samsara is to remove what caused the adhyasa. So here what happens is you have ajnanam causing adhyasa, which causes samsara. And the way to remove the samsara, the sense of smallness in myself, is to remove the adhyasa. And the only way to remove the adhyasa is to remove the ajnanam. There's no other way. You cannot pretend this is his rope. You cannot visualize. You cannot recede from it. You have to go back to the rope and throw light on it. Only then you can remove the adhyasa. So as the Purusha Suktam also says, na anyaf pantha ayanaya vidyate. This is a very important section of the Purusha Suktam. Ayanaya vidyate means, ayanaya means complete freedom, which is our nature. You cannot, there is no other way to gain the complete freedom until you know what your mistake is. In fact, this is such an important section that it repeats it in Purusha Sukta. Na anyaf pantha vidyate anaya. One time it says na anyaf pantha ayanaya vidyate, and one time it says na anyaf pantha vidyate ayanaya. It is like, if you go to the villages who are very poor, they can hardly have, and so they just have the basic staple diet. And then you say, what do you eat in the morning? What do you eat for breakfast? What do you eat for lunch? Sir, I eat dal chawal, lentils and rice, dal chawal. Then what do you eat for dinner? I eat chawal dal. So I can make some changes. It looks like they're different. This is the only thing there is. Na anyaf pantha ayanaya vidyate. And so, anyway. All right, now let us go into, in the next 10 minutes, I think I want to stop at about 9:10 and go into the rest of the prayers. So this is going to be interesting. Here, the approach taken by Swami Paramarthananda is going to be very useful to us. So, instead of simply reading the Bhashya and looking at it word for word, like we just did before, Yushmad Asmat Pratyaya Gocharayoho Vishaya Vishayinoho Tamaprakashavad Viruddha Svabhavayoho Itara Itara Bhava Anupapattau Siddhayam Tad Dharmanamapi Sutaram Itara Itara Bhava Anupapatti Tyataha Asmat Pratyaya Gochare Vishayini Chidatmake Yushmat Pratyaya Gocharasya Vishayasya Tad Dharmanam Cha Adhyasaha, etc., etc. In doing that, he gives you certain keys. Swami Paramarthananda, he just does this so well. I've not seen any of Swamiji's disciples do this quite as well. He gives you the keys of analysis. This is true for his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, on any one of them. Marvelous. And it only comes from a lot of study, lot of experience, and a lot of teaching to the people who don't have that background, to relate to them. So I'm going to use that same methodology. So with that being said, Swami Paramarthananda says that the Adhyasa Bhashya can be divided into 6 segments. 6 segments. First one is Adhyasa Shanka. Adhyasa Shanka means raised by the other schools of thought which say, what error are you talking about? There's no error. You keep talking about an error. What error are you talking about? No error. Adhyasa Shanka. Second segment is Adhyasa Samadhanam. Adhyasa Shanka Samadhanam. Saying, your objection doesn't stand water. This is how. Then Adhyasa, how is number 3, Adhyasa Lakshanam. This is exactly how this happens. So the rope and snake is a Lakshanam. And Adhyasa Sambhavana. So it is something like the Shanka, that okay, fine, but there is no possibility of error about myself. This is called number 4. Then number 5 is the Adhyasa Pramana, the proof of the Adhyasa. And number 6 is the Upasamhara, the conclusion of the Adhyasa topic. These are the 6 ways that we can look at these Adhyasa Bhashya. before we go into the first sutra itself. So we're going to look into and this is a very important section, as you know, Adhyasa Bhashya. So Adhyasa Bhashya, you have the entire file, and I think I read maybe about 15% of it. So there's another 85% of that. And then that's it. Then the Adhyasa Bhashya is complete. So these 6 segments pertain to this entire Adhyasa Bhashya. Okay. So here, rearrangement. First of all, he is going to look into Lakshana first. What are the Lakshana? Means something which is uniquely defined, which cannot be shared by anything else. It definitively sets it apart as the unique definition called Lakshana. So there are 2 definitions that are given directly and one which is given indirectly. So one of them is Smriti Rupaha Paratra Purva Drishta Avabhasaha Adhyasa. So this has to be defined. What is an Adhyasa? Adhyasa means Smriti Rupaha in the form of a memory, Paratra Purva Drishtaha Avabhasaha Adhyasaha. So in the example of the rope and snake, you must have a memory of snake in your mind. If you have never seen a snake, you cannot make the mistake that the rope is a snake. So a young kid who's 2 years old or even older in the USA, in all these cities, you've never seen a snake. You may have seen it on television, perhaps. But supposing you have not even seen television, you cannot make that mistake. So this is called Smriti Rupa. It must be triggered by memory. Then Paratra Purva Drishtaha. Now you may have seen snake elsewhere, but that memory of the snake has been superimposed on somewhere where it is not. This is one definition of Adhyasa. Smriti Rupaha, I think here it is, when we were reading this, it is here also. Remember that if you look at the second paragraph, it says, Aha kaha ayam adhyasa nama. It's interesting. So sometimes I think this will happen. I will go back and forth between the segmentations of Swami Paramarthananda and also the Adhyasa Bhashya. So if you look at the second paragraph, he says, so in the first paragraph we'll go later on. So in fact this is what Swami Paramarthananda also has said, is the number 3 segment is the Lakshana. So the Lakshana is given in the second paragraph. He says, Aha. Aha means he says it. Kaha ayam adhyasa nama. What are you talking about? Can you tell me what you mean by adhyasa? He says, Uchyate. Okay, now that you've asked me. He himself asks, if you were to ask, this is kind of like saying, if you were to ask me what is adhyasa, this is what I will say. Uchyate. Smriti Rupaha Paratra Purva Drishta Avabhasaha. This is the example. And here there is another simpler example which is given by Shankara elsewhere. I think he is not given it here. This is even a simpler example. It's called Atasmin Tad Buddhihi. Atasmin Tad Buddhihi. That means, Tad Buddhihi means that conclusion, at a place which has been brought from someplace else. So the rope example is not, I'm not saying that there is no snake. There is always a snake. But to put a snake on this rope, this is the Adhyasa. It's called Atasmin Tad Buddhi. It's an important definition. Then comes the indirect one. Indirect one is Sattya Anrita Mithuni Karanam. Sattya Anrita Mithuni Karanam. So it means mixing up two things that are totally different into a single one. So the Atma cannot be the body and the body cannot be the Atma, but they're all mixed up together. This is called Satya Anrit Mithuni Karanam. This is also an Adhyasa definition. This is a Lakshana. I'm sorry we're running out of time because the next section is very interesting, very important. And this is called the Adhyasa Shanka. Means that the mixing up is impossible. And there the Purva Paksha says, wait, I can see the rope and the snake example as okay. This one I can see. But it cannot apply to me in my case. That doesn't apply. You are mixing up, your example is not valid, it's invalid. Because you are mixing up the example with something which cannot happen. This is the Adhyasa Shanka, which we will do next class. It's amazing how quickly, I don't know about you, but I don't get enough time to complete my thoughts. We should have a 2-hour class. No, we're not going to have a 2-hour class. So with that, I will conclude today's class and finish the stotram, and then we will leave enough time for some questions. So, stotram number 6. Rahu grasta divankarendu sadrisho maya samachadnad sanmatra karanopasamharanato yo bhut sushuptaf puman pragasvapsamiti prabodha samaye yaf pratyabhigyayate tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye balyadishu api jagradadishu tatha sarvasvavasthasvapi vyavrittasvanuvartamanamaham ityantaspurantam sada svatmanam prakatikaroti bhajatam yo mudraya bhadraya tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Vishvam Pashyati Karya Karnataya Swaswami Sambandhataha Shishyacharyataya Tathaiva Pitra Putradhyatmana Bhedataha Swapne Jagrati Vaya Esha Purusho Maya Paribhramitaha Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Bhuram Bhamsya Nalo Nilo Ambartmaharnartho Himam Shufpuman Ityabhati Chara Charatmakamidam Yasyaiva Murtyashtakam Nanyat Kinchana Vidyate Vimrishatam Yasmat Parasmat Vibhoho Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Sarvatmatvamiti Sputi Kritamidam Yasmadamushmin Stave Tenasya Shravanat Tadarthamananat ध्यानाच्च संकीर्तनात् सर्वात्ममिति सर्वात्मत्व महाविभूति सहितं स्यादीश्वरत्वं स्वतः सिद्ध्येतत् पुनरष्टधा परिणतं चैश्वर्यमव्याहतम् अशुभानि निराचष्टे तनोति शुभसन्ततिं स्मृतिमात्रेण यत्पुंसां ब्रह्म तन्मङ्गलं परम् अतिकल्याणरूपत्वात् नित्यकल्याणसंश्रयात् स्मर्तॄणां वरदत्वात् च ब्रह्म तन्मङ्गलं विदुः ओङ्कारश्चाथ शब्दश्च द्वौ वेतौ ब्रह्मणः पुरा कण्ठं भित्त्वा विनिर्यातौ तस्मात् माङ्गिलकौ उभौ ओमथ ओमथ ओमथ। भाति First of all, yesterday I was thinking of some of you that are living in Texas and how you must have suffered. It's just an amazing suffering because of the weather, and I think I was trying to remember all the people that live there, and I wrote to them. So anyway, if you're listening, all the best to you. Hopefully this will be over soon and you'll be back living normal life. So that'd be good. One question, could you talk again on asangoham? Asangaha, how can be independent? We are all the same person. I'm not sure if I completely understand your question, but if your question is that if each one of this is independent, how can each one of, if your question is related to us looking at ourselves being independent of others, and everyone is independent of others, then there must be multiple people who are independent. How is that all possible? I think it requires a lot of teaching, a lot of study and so on. So the fact of the matter is that in reality, in the whole creation, there is only one person. There's only one person. You know, just like, for example, in each of us, it's not a perfect example, but just to give you a kind of a glimpse into it. So you and I are one person. Even though we have a lot of jivas that are existing within us. So if we have the viruses, there are millions of viruses already in our body. There are millions. The number of jivas that exist in me is uncountable. You cannot even say, I think we have 757 trillion. No. Incredible number of jivas. And there is so much going on inside. There is the good jivas, the bad jivas, they're fighting with each other, imbalances, all kinds of stuff is going on. But we are one person. You say, that's me. Yeah, I shake hands with me, I do namaste to you, I'm one person. Within that, there is so much going on. Anyway, similarly to that, in the entire cosmos, there is only one person. And that is Ishvara. That is Brahman. And the same Brahman manifests himself through all of us. Just because the manifestations are different, all the personalities are different, just like in an ocean. There's only one water. But the water presents itself in so many different ways. Small waves, huge ones, iceberg, this, that, or the other. Doesn't mean they are all different. There's only one person. So our job is to understand that I am really as a jiva not there. This is just a reflection. It's like a dream. And what is there is just Ishvara. There's no multiplicity there. And that is asangaha. So I have to discover that Ishvara and I are the one and the same, and in fact I am just a superimposition on the Ishvara. And everybody is the same. There's only one asanga. Anyway, something like that. We will talk about it some. Surjit Dikshit says, I would love a 2-hour class. I'm not sure that I can do it. Anyway, we'll see. Anyway, take care. I hope all of you stay well. And for those of you that are older, have gotten some vaccines. And take care of your families. Stay well. Okay, with that, I will see you next week. Om.